Mr. Ben Venice law firm was the law firm that kept Bridus tied up. They're also the law firm that lost the lawsuit when it went to the Supreme Court and the Fifth Circuit. They kept them tied up at least from 1998. They're involved in Pakistan, Turkmenistan, Kazakhstan, and Uzbekistan in about 20 different ways. You got the guy Thompson, the Republican governor, former governor of Illinois. He is sitting on the board of FMC. They have an oil and gas subsidiary. They make equipment. They're selling a lot of it overseas in the Caspian. Jamie Gorelick, I thought she was going to be a go-getter. I mean, I was rooting for her because she acted like she knew what she was doing. She sits on the board of Schlumberger, which is a competitor to Halliburton. Just within 2 weeks prior to the 9/11 Commission saying Sinai died and handing it over to the President and Congress to change our rights some more, which is what I think they plan to do, Schlumberger finally comes forward and admits they're having record profits in this last quarter, and they're doing a lot of big bucks business in the Caspian Basin. If you look at the reality that Bridus had a contract with the Taliban, we had landlocked oil and gas deals. We had to get it to the ocean. We had people actually doing business in Pakistan. You literally have to look at 9/11 and all of those foregoing issues as inseparable. There is your Pearl Harbor. And that our government can sit there and contrive policy like this. I came up with 4 words in this book. One was hopelessness. I see it all over this country, and I've seen it for a long time. The second word that came up to my mind was the indifference of our government. When you were speaking about the EPA, they can literally change reality because they're afraid it may affect something. And their policy does not have anything to do with quality of life or life. If it snuffs your life out economically or health-wise, so be it, if they think it's good policy. And it's both sides of the aisle in D.C. I call them financial terrorists. I don't know what you would call them.
I'd like to ask the first question to Webster Tarpley. Can you talk about the likely role of the neoconservatives, the civilians inside the Pentagon, in perpetrating 9/11? And if you like, can you comment on their likely response to a successful 9/11 movement that might put in jeopardy their hold on power this November?
When Bush ran for office, he ran, frankly, as a moron who would be a moron, but he would get the best advisors. So it's to the advisors that we have to look. And if we look at a Cheney or a Wolfowitz or some of these other people, here we see people that may very well be the conduits of the rogue network into the White House. But make no mistake, it is that rogue network which has been running the United States. Now, if I say rogue network, it may make them seem a little bit too lonely, and I don't think they're lonely. People who are old enough to remember the Iran-Contra years can remember words like the invisible government, the parallel government, the secret government, the shadow government. Senator Inouye said they had their own Army, Navy, Air Force, Treasury, their own policies, their own ways of making decisions. That invisible government, that secret government, I submit, is alive and well. The neocons are certainly a part of it. I call them neocon fascist madmen. But it's deeper. It's deeper, in my view. It's not just the neocons. The neocons have been part of this for perhaps 20 or 30 years, but it's something that's been around significantly longer. So I would say we have to look primarily at this network inside the U.S. government. Now, certainly other people provide auxiliaries. MI6 traditionally provides services. The Mossad obviously provides services. When we get down to something like Saudi intelligence or the ISI, again, these are a kind of walk-on parts in the middle of all this. But it seems to me that this is the thing that we have to confront. Now, this network is still in place. Nobody has laid a glove on them, much less this fake 9/11 commission with Kane and Hamilton.
We have to go on. We're running out of time.
Okay. So I would just say that's a group that's still there, and their reaction is most likely to be what they're doing right now. They're courting war with Iran, they're courting war with Syria, they're courting war with the Sudan, and most disturbing of all, they are courting war with Russia. Because according to President Putin and the Russian press right now, the people behind the massacre at that school in northern Ossetia are the United States government and the British government, and that's all over the Russian press.
Our last presenter for the evening is a very accomplished, award-winning Canadian journalist named Barry Zwicker, whose new film is called The Great Conspiracy, the 9/11 media special you never saw. Barry Zwicker.
Those who ignore history are condemned to repeat it, wrote Santayana. History is bunk, said Henry Ford. Of the two, I'm more with Ford. The problem with Santayana's thoughtful quote is that it assumes history is accessible enough to be ignored. The allure of Ford's seemingly anti-intellectual outburst is that it reminds us that history can be complete fiction. But I haven't been able to find anyone to quote on what seems to me to be the most significant point of all about history, namely that much, perhaps most, significant history is hidden. I.F. Stone wrote a book called The Hidden History of the Korean War. Daniel Burstyn wrote Hidden History, Exploring Our Secret Past. And I thank Jamie Hecht for that. He found that title on the internet today. Thank you, Jamie. Howard Zinn wrote essentially an alternative history a lot of you know about, A People's History of the United States. And more recently, Michael Parenti wrote History as Mystery. But, yes, unfortunately, Michael Parenti, my friend, is very, very poor on 9/11. For some reason, like Noam Chomsky, he just can't seem to get his head around this. It's a mystery to me. But the most lethal hidden histories, pound for pound, are the false flag operations that Webster Tarpley mentioned. These are the state-sponsored or rogue network toxic deceptions in which an actual attack on one's own country is engineered for the purpose of mobilizing public opinion, usually behind the war agenda of the invisible government and the ruling deceivers. Now, these deceptions tend to be turning points of history, leading to terrible loss of life and even downward spirals for whole countries. The book, Great War-Triggering Deceptions of All Time, is yet to be written. But when it is, it will be very thick and of utmost importance. And if it is written, I cannot think of an author more qualified and capable of writing it than Webster G. Tarpley. One more quote by an American cultural critic, Larry Ray. Again, thank you, Jamie. I couldn't remember the name, and Jamie found it. I didn't have access to the internet today. Jamie Ray wrote, "Anniversaries are reservoirs of sacred power." I saw this firsthand this morning at Ground Zero. But there is something more sacred than any commemorative occasion, and that is the search for truths about turning point events, specifically tonight, about the events of 9/11. You're owed at least two relevant examples of previous deceptions, and that's all there's time for. First, Pearl Harbor, the original outrage. Robert B. Stinnett's book, Day of Deceit, is, in my opinion, by far the most comprehensive work on the subject. A former U.S. naval officer, Stinnett invested 17 years in research, and he liberated 100,000 previously classified documents. To brutally summarize Day of Deceit, it proves, to my satisfaction at least, that for a year before Pearl Harbor, FDR had a plan, specifically an 8-point plan, to provoke the Japanese into attacking U.S. forces or facilities. He repeatedly emphasized that it must be the case that the Japanese fire the first shot, and what a shot it was. It required that a significant part of the U.S. fleet be made vulnerable, that those responsible for protecting that fleet have one or both hands tied behind their backs, that the Japanese remain unaware that all their codes right up through the high command had been broken, and broken good.